Hello, future vermiculturist. I'm here to talk to you about one of my favorite pets and that does the environment a world of good, my red wiggler worms. So what I have here is a worm factory. It's called the worm factory. You don't need anything as fancy as this, and we're going to make something much, much simpler. But basically, what we have is a couple of layers here because I've been at it for a while. In this layer right here, what we have is quite a bit of castings. All right, and if you could feel it, and I'll send some to school, it almost feels like mud. It's basically worm poop. Is that I put my kitchen scraps in with the worms. They eat it up, and what they leave is what we call worm castings, aka worm poop. All right, and it goes through this system, and at the bottom of this system, we have the water that's given off from all the moisture here. That we call compost tea. This is pretty strong stuff. It can be lethal to your plants, so you probably really want to dilute it before you pour it on your plants. But it is a form of fertilizer. The castings is excellent fertilizer for your food, for your plants. They eat it up. They love it. They love it. They love it. So inside of my worm bin here, one of my favorite things to feed my worms are coffee grounds, because interesting enough, worms don't really have a lot of teeth, and they have what we call a gizzard. And some of you might know that chickens have gizzards, and what happens in their throats is things kind of grind together, but they need to, eat rocks or little particles of soil. Coffee beans will do it, and used coffee beans are wonderful. However, you need to make sure that you don't use bleached coffee filters because the bleach in it might kill them. You can try it. Not all of them kill it, but there's a toxin in there sometimes that might not be good for it. So basically what I do is I peel my carrots, take the skins off my beets, take my coffee filter, and I dig a little in the castings, bury them, and that's all there is to feeding them. I don't need to water mine a whole lot because there's enough moisture from the things that I put in here, enough moisture from the fruit, enough moisture from the used coffee grounds to put in there. They are like any other living thing. They need the fiber, and in this case usually it's my coffee filter, as well as needing sources of vitamins. Here I have a nice carrot top. What else do I have in here? I have some, they love peppers, red peppers especially, sweet red peppers. They love that kind of thing. So I want to dig up a couple of worms here to show you. They're crawling all away because I've had this open for a while. Oh, here we go. Here we have a wonderful mass of some red wigglers. We want to use red wigglers and not earthworms. Because red wigglers, here's a little baby one. This one's not even a baby, it's a little bigger. Baby ones you can barely see because they're almost translucent and white. I'll look for some baby ones in there. Like I was saying, we want to use red wigglers because they thrive off of our garbage or our waste. Whereas earthworms, if you just take a worm out of your garden, they need soil. None of this is soil. I didn't add any soil. I'm going to show you how to produce some bedding in a little bit. But none of this is soil. They need soil, and they need significant amounts of it. And they tunnel. And if you disrupt those tunnels, like when I said I was going to bury my scraps, it disrupts their whole routine, and they are not happy, and many of them will die. I'm going to take a look, see if I can find a little baby in here. We might sometimes have little things on the top of the bin. Right here we have some. Sometimes if you put some corn cobs in there, they love to lay their eggs in those corn cobs. Worms reproduce by little cocoons, or their eggs in their little cocoons. And about 10 days later, the little baby hatches. Takes about 10 weeks for worms to fully mature to reproducing adults. So, you know, what I want to do probably next, I'm getting pretty full on here, is I probably want to put a next level on here soon. And then I would just put in paper scraps, some food, and the worms eventually would come up through these holes and start feeding up here. Eventually, I would have just pure castings down below. Wonderful material to plant my seeds, to give to some of my house plants, to plant in your vegetables, what have you. All right, let's go make some mini worm bins. Your own worm bins. Now, a couple of years ago, I had a Girl Scout troop for second graders, and we made them out of cottage cheese containers, yogurt containers, whatever. All we did was poke some holes on the top, you know, so that the worms could breathe, and some on the bottom so that, you know, they wouldn't kind of like drown in their own urine, and we were good. They packed all of their we packed all the bedding and all the food in there. One project that I'm working on at the school I work at is we're making some worm bins out of kitty litter. I'm working with probably 8 graders on this. All we're going to do is, again, drill some holes in the bottom here. We're going to drill some holes on the top so our worms can breathe, and then we're going to fill it up with bedding and everything else. What we're going to do today is kind of somewhere right in the middle of this, these two projects, and we're going to use plastic coffee cans. We're going to use plastic coffee cans for this. And what we need is we need a drill. We have a 1/4 inch bit there, and we have 1 inch, I'd say about 2.5 inches dowels and cut up, and we got a hammer, and we're all set here. We also have our little spray bottle, some newspaper, and we're going to feed them, and of course our red wigglers. So to start with, you need the covers on both of these. Actually, you might even want to use 3 coffee cans. I'm recommending starting with just 2, see how much you like it, and then we'll go from there. Take your drill, and all we're going to do, you might want to be careful. I did this on the other one, not to get it on the lip. It makes it a little difficult. And we're just going to drill through and add our dowel. The reason for the dowels is so that it doesn't move, right? We're going to put these on top of each other, and then it won't move. So that's why we have those dowels on there. All right, 3 seems to do it. Now what we need to do is make some holes so that the warm urine or the moisture kind of goes down into our capture bin. That's what it looks like from the inside. We're just going to attach these now. Roll them on and attach them. And like I said, if you want to make it into a 3 bin one, so it resembles my worm farm a little bit more, feel free, but a great place to start would be with 1. Now, our worms also need to breathe, okay? They need fresh air. One of the things that keeps the smell out of our compost is oxygen, okay? And so our worms need to bring in, they're living, breathing things, so they need oxygen. So one way to do this would be to take a smaller bit and drill, make little holes all in here. All right, so now we're going to make some aeration holes in here. Now we want to make these holes big enough to get some airflow into it, but we want to keep the flies out. Now, not only will your compost have worms, but there will be different kinds of fungi and bacteria that's natural to decomposition in here. In fact, once you get some castings, you might want to take some of them and put them underneath a microscope and see what kind of living creatures you actually have in there. It's fascinating. Okay, so we have our bin done now. The next thing we need to do is we need to be thinking about bedding, our warm bedding. Don't worry about the dowel rod. Wood is completely natural. It won't harm our worms at all. All right, so for bedding, there's a couple of things that you can use. Right now, in the dead of winter, probably the thing we have most available to us is newspaper or scrap paper. All right, newspaper is great because it's soft, it's not too thick, and can decompose easy. All you do is rip it. The bad part about using newspaper is your hands get kind of dirty, but it washes right off. The ink, as long as we are looking at black with just maybe a little color or pigment, we're okay. It's non-toxic, the black. However, we want to definitely avoid the multiple colors and things like that. And definitely these like sale ads where we have the glossy paper, that's toxic for our worms, so we don't want to use that. Other things that you might want to use for your worm bedding are some dead leaves. That would, they seem to love that. Anything like really organic, meaning it comes directly from a plant, they definitely love. Worms need about 3/4 of the bin full. That's not an exact science to it, but one of the things we need to do is make sure that it's light and fluffy. We don't want it to be hard and compact. The reason why is they need oxygen. Our worms need oxygen, and we need oxygen for decomposition. And if we don't, we also need oxygen flow because we don't want it to smell. Okay, so we want to keep this kind of aerated, right? We don't want to make more holes in here for more little critters to get into here, but we definitely don't want it compact. Next thing we want to do is worms are living things. All living things need water. So we want to add some moisture to this. We don't want to add too much moisture because then we start to get mold and things like that. But we know that worms breathe through their skin. Okay, think about you in the winter when you're outside. It's not snowing, not raining, anything like that. In the winter, there's not a whole lot of moisture in the air. And then it becomes dry. Your lips get chapped, things like that. It's harder to breathe when there's no moisture. And you know how slimy a worm is. That's because their respiration is coming out and they need that water to go in there. So, you know, get it damp, but not too, because we don't too damp. We don't want them to drown in there. All right, that's looking pretty good. And later on, the more organic material you add, and especially if you're eating a lot of fruits and vegetables, as well as some wet coffee grounds, you don't have to worry quite as much about making sure that they stay damp. They kind of regulate themselves after a while. So there we go. Now we have our bedding. All right. Next, we need to talk a little bit about what to feed your worms. So we're going to go over further into the kitchen here, and we're going to take a look at some things you might want to feed your worms. Now remember, you have a little bin, so you probably don't want to put things in there that take a long time to decompose, because that's when you start getting pests. That's when you start getting the smells. So you want to stay away from kind of like really hard peels, like a potato peel, sweet potato peels. I know I fed them to my worms, and it just takes a long time to decompose. Since we are worried about smell, avoid meats, bones. Some vermicomposters will definitely say, yeah, you can add meat, you can add bones, but it really attracts critters. You don't want the mice, you don't want the rats. If you're outside, you're going to get all kinds of stuff. You don't want that. Some talk about bones. I tend to avoid it because I don't want to take the chance of smell. Onions, they can digest some of the onion. However, will produce smell. We want to avoid as much smell as possible by continuing to promote the aerobic decomposition by having that oxygen flow, but we don't want to put in food that's really going to stink it up as it decomposes. Citrus Too much citrus can be toxic to your worms. There's a fine line with the pH levels and everything else in there. I tend to just avoid it, and they seem to kind of like not mind it. Mine have. Could they eat a potato chip? They probably could, I'm thinking. But any processed food takes much longer to decompose, and just like all of you, you know that eating processed foods probably isn't the healthiest for you. These are living things. You want to keep them as healthy as possible by feeding them as natural as possible. Probably bakery. Oh, the sugar in there, probably not the best for them. So some of the things that you definitely probably want to feed your worms. Apple cores are fabulous, and when you feed them, they're tiny, right? You want to cut this up as small as possible. Some vermicomposters actually even make a blend. They blend things up in their blender and kind of give their worms a smoothie. I don't necessarily do that. And I apologize, my banana peel now is much, it's starting to decompose on its own because I had it outside in my decomposition pile there, my compost bin, sorry. But they love banana peels. They love banana peels. They love peppers is another thing they love. Okay, then of course we talked about coffee grounds. It's another thing they really like. Just try and make sure your filters are not the bleached filters. We don't want the white filters. You want to try and get as natural as possible. If you have a Keurig, do not put the plastic in there. That will not decompose. And finally, eggshells. Okay? Now with eggshells, this is what you have to be really careful of. You need to make sure they are washed out or it will smell like immediately. So make sure they're really well scrubbed. Mine's falling apart. I know Ms. Larson is bringing you eggshells, and then you want to pound them because this is great for their gizzards. They will definitely take that in there. So, you know, whatever hammer you have, it'll be fun, all right? Or you can mash them up with your hand. If you can make them even finer than that, that would be wonderful. Okay, feeding time. I kind of just mix everything in with my coffee grounds here a little bit. Got a nice mash here. Okay, and then I'm going to bring this over to my bin. And when I feed mine, you saw me bury my things. You need to bury. That is really, really crucial. It will help with the smell. It will help to start the decomposition and everything else. And we know worms don't like light, so they will definitely dig in. I kind of flip it over so that they are also protected by the coffee filter or whatever you have. Cover it up. And then you will be adding your red wigglers to our compost bin. And you're going to want to check on it probably a week and see how it's doing. You want to make sure that the bottom part doesn't overfill. It will take quite a bit of time for it to fill up. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to hearing your vermicomposting stories.